Always a joy to be with you all. This community has a heart to it that's just beautiful. It's nice to be here.
We are happy.
Thank you. Our topic today is about living in the overflow. And we're going to be talking about prosperity. Everyone has heard this conversation before. Sometimes it's good to just re-presence ourselves to it. And the intention is to have us be conscious of the fact that God has it, and so do we. You know, when I was starting to think about this conversation about consciousness, I was remembering myself as a young person growing up. My mother was a single parent, and she was definitely struggling as we came up in South Central Los Angeles. But my mother had a vision. And, but the vision, the thing that tended to take the brunt of the vision was there was always this issue about a car. Like, for some reason, I think she had some sort of car karma curse, because no matter what car we had, it was awful. But there was one car in particular.
There was one car in particular that was particularly memorable. It was a 1968 Volkswagen. That, you remember the sky blue Volkswagen bugs?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it wasn't entirely sky blue. It had a red hood, and one of the fenders was kind of a primer. And there was something going on with the bungee cord there in the front of the bed that my brother had kind of jimmied. One of the lights didn't work, and it had a tendency to have big billowing smoke and backfire. You know? My mother refused to be embarrassed about this vehicle. And what her commitment was that even though we were living in poverty, she was committed that we go to the best schools. She refused to have us go to the schools in the area, so we would have to drive 45 minutes away to go to the parochial school of the church we went to. And of course, we couldn't just go to any parochial school. Oh no, we had to go to the one where all the rich kids went. So, you know, they're driving up in their Beamers and Jaguars and da-da-da. You know, there's a way where you drive into the school that goes through the middle of the school and drives out. Oh, could she drop us off at the front? Oh no. Through the middle of the school, backfiring, billowing smoke, can't get out the door of the car, right? But she had a commitment, right? And her commitment was that we would get the best possible education. And I think that that has been fulfilled in the way that my brother and I are living our lives. I'm an attorney and a judge. My brother is the vice president of a bank. And we have a thing about having nice cars. So yes, that would be my convertible BMW in the parking lot. Sometimes it's just one of those things. But when we start having a conversation about poverty and about wealth consciousness, one of the things that was real confusing to me coming up was this idea that there was a God that was pleased by us being poor, that it was somehow next to godliness, that there was some God in the sky somewhere who was looking down and said, you know, you're more spiritual if you're not enjoying wealth. And there was actually, on some level, kind of a pride about it, you know, and a distrust of people who had things. You know, those people, yeah, they have money, but they're worldly. Those people have money, but who knows how they got it. You know, there was a whole lot of judgment around people who had more. And there was a confusion for me around how could there be a God that is interested in us being poor? And there was some real poverty, and I'll share some of that with you. I've been reading Michael Bernard Beckwith's little book. He has a small book about living in the overflow. And he says the first thing that we need to understand is that genuine wealth is a state of consciousness that realizes its inborn oneness with eternal cause, the very source of all that is. You know, when I think about oneness, everything for me begins with a conversation about oneness. Who is this person that we are relating to as this eternal spirit? Who and what is this eternal source? You know, and I start looking around for evidence. It's a lawyer thing. We always need evidence. What is the evidence that there is a source that is limitless? You know, we got up this morning and the sun came all the way up. You know, it didn't come up kind of halfway and somebody, you know, like some bean counter accountant's like, well, we're a little short on sunrises this morning, so you guys are going to have to make do, right? The stars are still in the sky. The earth is still in orbit. The oxygen is still here. There's still water flowing. There's still life breathing in and out as me. There is still this eternal source of oneness. And when you consider that there can be no such thing as the universal source being short on source, right? There's no such thing. It can't happen. Why? Because God is eternal. God is infinite. That spirit within us that lives in me, that lives in everything that is, has no beginning, has no end, is not bound by time, it's not bound by my thoughts, it's not bound by circumstances. All of this happens. But what's really true is that this divine spirit is, always is, limitless. So everything that I need is absolutely wrapped up in this experience of source. Now, a lot of times we start looking at it. So then, you know, I started looking at, you know, these stories about, well, why would God, you know, say things, you know, you read things in the Bible where Jesus said things like it's easier for a rich man to get into, a camel to go through an eye of a needle than for a rich man to get in heaven. So that was always kind of used as evidence of, well, you know, you shouldn't, you know, have money. And, you know, if you were like struggling a little, that was somehow some sort of a spiritual experience and all of that. Really? What's really true about that is that this is a conversation about attachment. It's a conversation about attachment. Is my ego somehow identified with a material condition? Do I make it mean something about me based on what I'm wearing, what I look like, what I'm driving, what my job is, you know, what community I'm living in? That's really the question, is where is our ego tied up into believing that circumstances are more powerful or more real than the Creator? That is the question. And so often we can look at circumstances, especially, you know, this comes up when things aren't going exactly how we had hoped, right? And then things don't go exactly how we had expected them to. And then we start looking at the circumstances as if that's actually what's real. When what it is it's a form. It's a form, it's a play, it's the box that we're playing with right now, but it's not the truth. My daughter, she's 23, and she decided I don't know how long this is going to last, she decided that she wasn't going to go to the clubs anymore, unlike her mother who lived there in her 20s. And she bought herself a PlayStation 4, really a golden, like, oh, it was like, wow, that's good idea. And she's playing these video games, right? And she plays like these sim video games that are like, you know, she has to build a family and farm and get married. I mean, it's a game, right? And I think of my life that same way. Like, I'm playing this game, but it's not who I am. Because she can turn the game off and then, you know, she goes to work, right? Well, that's so often we look at the game that we're playing, we look at the circumstances in the game, and your little sim isn't winning that particular section of the game, right? My daughter used to just run him off a cliff and start over. You'd hear him go, oh. But so often we play this game of prosperity. We play this game in our lives. We play these games of circumstance like that's really the truth. And we have an emotional reaction to them. And we start to act like this is what is so. And it's so important for us to really just look at it, hey, this is a PlayStation 4. It may look golden. It may have like a controller that has like really cool like infrared lights and beeps and vibrates and all that. It may seem very real. But what's actually real? What's actually real is that Spirit is infinite source within us. Spirit has it. You know, I don't know if you ever had the experience of going to your parent being like, hey, can I get this game or this toy? And they'd say, oh, I don't have it. That never happens with our Divine Father and Mother. That never happens with the Divine Source. Spirit always has it. Because if there's it was created inside of divine intention. And that source is boundless, it's limitless, and it is always there. It is always there for us. So what we have to do is constantly just remind ourselves that whatever game we're playing is a game, and that we are wealth consciousness. Because inside of our inherent wholeness is the understanding that you wouldn't be wanting to have this higher expression of the divine. You wouldn't be wanting to have this higher expression of something that looks like a desire to live in beauty and love and prosperity and have a good life if there wasn't this spirit of wholeness in you calling for it. So all we're doing is allowing that to express itself as us in the most profound and beautiful ways. And so, as you know, it becomes about allowing and recognizing that we don't have poverty consciousness. We have wealth consciousness, because our wealth consciousness is automatically an inherent part of who we just are. And all we do is just let it flow. You know, Jesus said that seek ye first the kingdom of heaven and its righteousness, and all these things will be added unto you. So it doesn't mean that you shouldn't have the things. It says seek ye first. So what are we seeking? You know, Deepak Chopra, I was rereading the 7 Spiritual Laws of Success, and on the first page he talks about how spirit is infinite potentiality. Infinite potentiality. Anything you want is inside of the vibration of spirit. How we get there is by aligning ourselves with that divine source, aligning ourselves with the oneness. Like when we do a prayer treatment, the first step we do is what? Aligning ourselves with that spirit. So the world has its consequences and its games, and it has its conversations about karma and conversations about, well, you know, deserving, like all of that. And then there's a horizon line, and then we go straight for oneness. And once we're in the oneness and the wholeness, all of the other stuff falls away. Because once we are reminded that we are whole, perfect and complete, absolutely in alignment with the divine light, all of the other stories are on the console on the PS4. It stops being what's real. The light of the divine that shines through us, as us, the light of the divine that's infinite, is more powerful than anything that has ever been. There is no such thing as anything more divine, more light than God in you. There's nothing more powerful than God in me. So when these circumstances, when these games show up that look like not that, we look at that game and turn it off. Because we have the power to turn the game off and stop believing that that's what's real. And we know that what's real, what's true, is this highest light within us that is God. There is no darkness that is more powerful than this light. There is no circumstance that is more powerful than this light. There is no agreement in the entire world that is more powerful than this light in you. You have the ability, I have the ability to look poverty, world poverty in the eye and say there is limitless abundance. I can look hatred in the eye and say there is God's love and it is in me and it is profound. And I allow it to expand inside of me. until it becomes so huge that in the space where I am, in the space where my consciousness is, there can be no lack. It cannot exist inside of the space that is God in you. It cannot exist. And it is so important for us to be radical terrorists against darkness in us. Not a casual belief. Not like, oh, I know this in my head. Oh, I heard that somewhere. I've heard that before. It's on us as people who are in this new thought to take on knowing this God in us is so powerful. Knowing it from an experiential place, not in our heads, not as a belief, not even as faith, but taking it to that next level where nothing can separate us from this divine light shining forth from us. We have to be absolutely willing to be like my crazy mama and drive that raggedy car because she had a vision for what our lives would be and not care about what the circumstances look like. I'm standing here. I don't care what it looks like. I'm standing here. I don't care what the doctor report said. I'm standing here. And I'm standing here in absolute faith. I'm standing here in absolute trust. I'm standing here in absolute love because I know who I am and I know who God is in me. And there is nothing more powerful. There cannot be. And I embrace that with every part of my being. The question is, are we willing to do that? So often we look at what looks like our circumstances and our lives and all of that. You know what? I'm working on all of that. And I may not have it all handled. But you know what my vision is? I am the flow of the river of the divine. I am flowing with that spirit. And you know, that riverbed may have some rocks. It may have some bumpy waters. I may not have it all figured out. But you know what? That flow still flows. That flow still flows. It has no beginning and no end, and it flows through me like a mighty current. That mighty current of God, that mighty current of health, that mighty current of wholeness, that mighty current of God's Spirit flowing through me. I know that I've got work to do, but nonetheless, there is no barrier with me that's more powerful than God. And I call on that. Flow through me. Bring it. Bring it. Bring it, Spirit. I know Spirit has it. And in every area of my life, I call on divine currents, powerful, mighty rivers of love to flow through me. Powerful, mighty currents of love, of power, of beauty, of wholeness, of compassion, of wealth. Are you willing to do this? I need somebody to be a witness. Yes! I am willing to be the flow. I am the flow. Say it for yourself. I am the flow. I am powerful beyond measure. And I know God is good.
And I know God is good.
So it is.
And so it is.